Jennifer Whiting, mundanely. My email address is there if you want to reach me. That's my SEA email address. These slides are available. They act as my handouts, so you are welcome to download them and do what you will with them. I am going to spotlight my other video, so I am going to take demo here and make that the main gig here. And all right, so you should be able to take your video and pop it out and show your active speaker video here with this little button here and change the size of it. Or you can drag your screen left and right to make that bigger, but you're gonna need to have that demo area so that we can see what we're doing. Also, if you open your participants list, you can also pop that out into another screen. And at the bottom of your participants list, there is a yes and no button. We have people that are following along with their sewing kits. So we're gonna sometimes ask whether you're ready to go. And you can yes and no. At the bottom of the participants list, yes or no, when I ask if you're ready to move on. And if you're not following along, I think we are recording. Are we recording? Yes. Is there anybody that has a problem with this being recorded? All right. Great. Thank you. All right, so I am going to go through several stitches today, and we're going to talk about a little bit about thread, some of the stitch uses as we go through the different stitches, where you might locate some garments that use those stitches. I'm going to have some images of their use, and I'm going to do a demo. So these are kind of going to happen all at once as we go through the different slides. First, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about thread. So from experience, I see a lot of these questions on the forums online. You know, when do you use wool? When do you use linen? So I only sew with wool on wool. I've found that you have a lot of problems with shrinkage if you ever do go to wash something when you are using anything but wool on wool. I highly recommend that. However, you can use linen on wool and you can use linen on linen. So those different products, I think my favorite is 96 District Storehouse. I think they're 96 District Fabrics now. They sell these little balls of linen that I love, and they come in bleach. They come in a natural color. They also have a black, which is nice. And I also have found some linen spools, which I really like. And don't forget when you're sewing with linen that you really need to keep some beeswax near you because linen is going to shred very quickly. I find wool shreds real quickly too, so you're going to keep that in mind with wool. But definitely with linen, you're going to want to pull that through either some beeswax or, as my grandmother used to do, drag it across your chin. As long as it's oiled, that will help you out there. When you are sewing on silk, which is probably a little more rare because it's very expensive fabric, but silk bindings on wrists and things like that. I use silk on silk just because it is so delicate. I'm able to get a much easier time in getting through the threads when you're using silk and silk. As I said, don't use wool on linen, wool thread. You're going to have some real problems with shrinkage and problems with that as you go. So color-wise, you want to match your fibers. So match your color of thread to your cloth, or use an undyed thread on your cloth. The affectation of having a different color thread is really an anachronism. So you want to get as close as you can. Now today, I am going to use black on white as we go through, just so you can see. That is not intended to mean that you use a different color thread on your fibers. Anybody have any questions on threads? All right, so before we even start with a running stitch, I want
Robert has a question.
The thread resource, I buy it at 96 District Fabrics.
Okay.
Often go to
Thank you.
larger events like Penzic and Gulf Wars. But they do sell online too. Thank you. All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about starting a piece of thread and how to knot it. So as my grandmother always showed me, take it around your finger so you have a little tiny thread sticking out. Got a loop around your finger, little thread sticking out, and all you do is you roll that, and that little thread is going to go around in a circle, and it's going to make that knot, and then you can pull it and you'll have your knot. I'm losing my camera. Okay. Again, around your finger, roll it, let that little end flip around, and then pull it, and you get your knot. So that's going to take some practice. If you need to just stop and knot as we go through, that's fine. You can also, let me adjust my camera. You can also back stitch a little bit as you start. So I wanted to start off by doing a little bit of how do you get started in this. So I usually use at least a ½ inch, especially if I'm going to finish my edge in some way. So I'm going to come down here right at the start of my fabric. I'm going to come up through my fabric. Now I've got a knot in that fabric, but I still like to come back and just go around that edge. And now I'm just going to pull that. Oh, I made the one mistake of going around my knot. And then you have a pretty tight start around the end of your fabric. So it's actually going around the little edge of my fabric there. And so that's kind of holding my edge together pretty well. So now let's talk about the ubiquitous stitch, the running stitch. So I am going to play Julia Child here. And oh, look, we have our running stitch started. All right, so your main seams most of the time are going to be running stitch, overcast stitch. There'll be some that are overlapped and then bound with something like a herringbone stitch or overcast. So this is a really good stitch to use just for putting your garments together. They had this in Hedeby, Dublin, York, Viborg, Denmark. So this is ubiquitous. You're going to see this a lot. And if you look at the slides, you'll see it's just an in and out and not a back stitch. That's not something that we saw in the Viking era. So it's just up and down, in and out. And per inch, this was about 7 to 10 stitches per inch. So it's teeny tiny. It looks big here. This is just a little fragment. And when you take apart this fragment and look at it, this stitch right here up the side of this fragment actually looks like it was a running stitch. Some of this garment is overcast stitch in through here. This, if you went to the 915 Hedeby tunic class, this is the diagrams that she was showing. This is the real garment. But this right here is coming apart a little bit, and it does have an in and out stitch on it right here. So where are you going to use this? Main seams, sewing down some edges. You can use this on hems. A lot of times you'll see that a hem is turned, and then this is done more of as a little in and out stab stitch along the edge of your hem to hold the edge closed. So we're going to do a little bit. Go ahead and get, if you're following along, get your knot made and go in through your fabric. You don't have to go around the edge, just get it started and pull that out so that you have a good tension and a good place to start. And then we are just going to go, and I'm going to do it the long way here. I'm going to go over about two stitches. See, it's just a couple of widths of thread, little teeny tiny stitches. And I'm going to pull it all the way through. And then I'm going to come over about two more of my little warper wefts. I'm not sure which way I'm going here. And I'm going to pull it back through. So that is just back and forth, up and down. Come over two more. And one of the nice things about linen is you've got these lovely lines going through your linen that you can follow. So it's a good way to keep yourself straight. If this is straight along in here where you cut your fabric, then these are going to be pretty straight too. So up and down like that. Now, there is no shame in coming in with a piece of chalk and a ruler and giving yourself some guidance. None at all. I mean, you can brush that off later and nobody's going to know the difference. So if you're new to sewing, this is a really good way. I sharpen my chalk, so I have a nice little edge, but you can use a chalk pencil and that works real good. And I just come in here and just give yourself a little line. I know you can't see that, but there's a line there that I can see. And that is going to help you to stay a little straighter in there. So we're about a half inch from the edge if you want to do some finishing work, and then straight along in here. Now I'm going to need you to sew a little bit because we're going to need to have some stitches in order to move on. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. When you are at about 5 inches across there, I want you to give me a little yes sign. And I'm going to show you a little secret here that you do not need to go up and down. Oh, I am so totally caught. You do not need to go up and down through that fabric if you're using linen. If you're using something heavier, you probably do. What you can do is sew from the top and catch the bottom and just go up and down, catching the bottom like that. Now that's a little bit of an advanced technique, but you can get multiple stitches in on your needle and then pull it through, and it's just going to speed you up a little bit. The stitches tend to be a little wonkier. You can see I kind of have a little burble there, and they tend to be a little longer, but it is going to speed you up. So if you need to go down through there and speed up. So I'm going to give you a minute or two to sew about 5 inches worth on your scrap fabric, and then give me a check mark when you are ready to roll. Anybody have any questions while you're working? Grace says she likes to do a back stitch every 3 to 7 inches about every time she pulls the needle through on what I just did on this.
Yes, that's 3 to 7 stitches.
Yep.
Basically, every time I fill my needle and I pull it out, I do one back stitch.
Little back stitch. So I'm coming back right here, coming back, and then I'm going through. And I do that also. I don't know of any documentation for that.
A stitch in time saves 9.
Right. All right, so we are giving people a little chance to sew some. And when you are ready, you're going to give me a yes in the participants list. Probably should have asked who's not following along.
If you're not following along, then you're ready to go.
Yeah, that would be great. Give me a green check mark anyway. How's that sound?
How do I give you a check mark on the app? Do you know? Because I've never used the app before, but Darren is using the whole living room.
I have no idea.
That's okay. I'll just keep sewing, and whenever you're ready to start, I'll focus on whatever you're doing.
That sounds great. Thank you. Okay. All right. If you are not following along with sewing, go ahead and give me a green check mark anyway so that I know that people are ready to roll. And that's at the bottom of the participants list. You'll just open that list up, and that's right at the bottom.
I've never done hand sewing, so I'm going as fast as I can.
Oh, I am not hurrying you up at all. We have time. And bam, look how fast I did that. That was awesome. I need Julia Child's bottle, you know, and a little of this. What I suggest that you do as soon as you finish, just take your needle off that thread and make yourself a new thread. And then leave that thread just in case we need to sew a little bit more, just leave it hanging. And then get yourself a new thread and we'll move on to the overcast. Mm-hmm. Well, all right. Let's stop where you are. And if you have just a couple of inches done, you are good to go. And let's see what's next. All right, this is a really useful stitch. It's an overcast. Sometimes you're going to see that it's called the whip stitch. You can use this on neck openings. You can use this on hems. You can see here on the slide that they use this on a brooch loop. And that goes all the way around, and then they whip stitched it together. You can use it as a raw seam finish. So you can see that this looks like a little bit of a French seam on the right-hand side here. And I'm going to show you how to do that. You can lay down your raw edges, and you can whip stitch those, and I'm going to show you that. And then this is another seam finish where you lay in a cord, and this is a double ply thread, and you whip stitch over it. And this is think this is a hem, but you can also use this as a neck finish. It's a real nice pliable neck finish. So the folded in raw edges, like the one on the top right, was found at Hedeby. The whip stitch cord was found in Dublin and Herjolfness, and that is a 14th century find. So that's why I called this Scandinavian stitches. And then flat filling the seams was pretty ubiquitous. So we are going to do that overcast French seam because this is a really nice one. And anytime in period that someone says, oh, they had French seams, this is what they mean. So it is your running stitch, and then you have your 2 raw edges here, and all you're going to do is fold those raw edges in, and I actually usually match them up to where my seam is running, and then give it just a little pull with your nail. And linen is really nice, and cotton works the same way, wool not so much, but linen will finger press like that. So if you just give it a couple of little scratches with your hand, or you can lay it down and you can rub it with your finger, that will press that without having to get up and go to your iron to press that seam in. So you're just turning those raw edges in so they meet. And then when you close that, you have a real nice edge there on top. Any questions about what I did there? All right. Then you are just going to start with a knot. You are going to come out with your knot, and you are going to go in from the back and out through the front. And it's just a little tiny stitch. Do you see I only have a few threads from that edge? And hopefully that in from the back. And now I'm coming over about 1/4 of an inch. You can go a little smaller, you can go a little bigger. In from the back, out the front. So just going around and around in a little circle around that edge. In from the back, out the front. In from the back. Oh, my document camera. Hello. Well, isn't that exciting? All right, guys, I want you to practice that. My document camera computer just like decided to have a really big catastrophe over here. So practice that overcast stitch while I step back and punt here.
Patty asks, is that angled?
It is a little bit, but it's angled between the stitches. The front to back is directly through the fabric. That is not angled.
If anyone here has taken my veil class, it's the same thing. It's just a different way of, the stitch is the same, what you do to the fabric is different.
Oh, there we go. Hang on. Okay. After you've done about 2 inches of that, I'd like you to give me a check mark. Hang on, let me clear all. And you can give me a check mark when you've done that. Okay. You're going to lose my beautiful face here for a minute. Oops, sorry. Whoa, come back here. Sorry. Oh, all the days for me to have computer trouble. Sorry, guys. Just keep sewing. Just keep sewing. All right. We have a number of people that are ready to move on, and I'm going to watch time real close here. And because I am having some document camera problems, to hunt. All right. So guys, I can't see it. Can somebody give me some feedback if that looks okay? Can you see me right there? Well,
Maybe a little bit closer to you.
a little closer to me.
There we go.
That's better.
That's good.
Okay. So I'm going to show this one. You don't have to do this one, but I'm going to show you laying in this yarn with the overcast stitch. So I am just laying this down, and this is a raw edge. So I'm doing a hem. I'm going to lay down that piece of yarn, and I don't want a whole lot of stitch showing on the outside, so I'm going to come over first, and I'm going to go through just a little bit of the outside and up through that raw edge of the hem, and it's going to capture this yarn in between it. And if you look out on the back side, these are little tiny stitches. Now remember, I'm only using a different color thread here because I want you to see the stitches. So when I come out from this thread, sorry, I got some yucky there, you'll see on the back little tiny stitches in and up over that piece of yarn. So it looks like a nice edge here. There's enough of the wool here being captured, and the outside does not have a whole lot of thread showing on that side. So you can use this again for neck holes, for hems. Very common in the Greenland find to see stuff like this, although it was in some of the period finds also. So that is a nice,
Genevieve,
yes.
I think you need to advance the PowerPoint just a
No, it's on the, do you see the round dots?
Okay, it's this bottom one.
It's the bottom one, yeah.
Okay.
All right. I am almost back in on my other computer, guys. Okay. So
Was
Sorry.
the cord simply to strengthen the edge or the seam, or did it have a different purpose?
Yes, that's all it is. It's to provide that little extra strength, and it actually produces a really awesome edge that it almost acts like a little horsehair braid. If you've ever used that on the bottom of a dress, it provides just a little bit of a flounce to the bottom of a dress. So I do use it in areas where I want that little bit of extra support. It does also lessen the amount of fraying that you have. Now with wool, you're not going to have a whole lot of fraying, but if you do a wool piece of yarn against your wool, it's going to felt together a little bit. So it's going to even make that edge stronger and less apt to fray. So, yeah. All right. And the next one that I want to show you, we're going to do the flat felling, which is on the bottom right corner. All right. And I'm so close to having that up. All right. Now you have your piece where you did your running stitch along in here, and you may have used that to turn in your edges and you have a little bit of an overcast going. Just take some scissors and just cut it so that you can get to your edges again so that you can splay these out. So what you're going to do with the flat felled is you are going to lay your two sides of your fabric open, and you're going to press open where you have your seam. So you can see my little black seam running down in through there. It's just flat on the outside like that. And now we're doing the same stitch that we just did with that overcast. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to get that started. And you know, I don't think I have a knot. So I'm going to make a knot. All right. So I am going to just get that started by coming through the fabric and up through a couple of threads in from the edge. You want enough threads there on your wool. This is wool. You want enough threads here that it's going to hold that thread in. And you're going to pull that out. And you're going to step over about a little less than 1/4 of an inch. Pick up a little bit from the outside. You're just going to grab a couple of threads there and then come up through your selvage edge there. So you're just going to come across first, then through the outside, just a couple of threads, and then you're going to come up through your raw edge. And that is going to make it look like that overcast stitch that we did with the French seam. It looks just like that, except it's running down the length of this, and then you'll come over to this side and you'll run it down the other side. And then again on the outside, you can't even see these stitches on the outside because of the felting, a little bit of fooling that's done right there by the fabric. Now, if you had linen here, you probably will want to give it a little bit of a turn under. So again, just like you did with that overcast stitch before, turn under the raw edge. And with linen, this will protect your raw edge. And so now you're coming through the outside, just a couple of stitches, picking up over there, and you're coming through that fold. All right. I'm going to clear you, and I want you to try flat felling your seam like that, and try folding under a little bit and flat felling through that fold. And if anybody has any questions, let me know. Again, you don't want to go straight down through the fabric and then up. It's going to give you much too much on the outside. Come across first and then pick up your little threads from the outside and then up through the fold like that. Across, through the outside, up through the fold. When you've tried about 1.5 inches of that, go ahead and give me a check mark.
Visually, that looks very similar to a blind hem stitch.
Yeah, so it is exactly what we are going to do for the blind hem stitch.
Awesome, thank you.
So you are ahead of that game. Yep.
Blind hem might be my favorite stitch because I love how it disappears.
Right. Yep, you are just doing a blind hem stitch right on a folded over seam. That's all that is. Anybody have any questions, throw them in the chat. I'm watching the chat. Or talk.
So question, with this particular flat felling, I've seen images, not images, I've seen SCA pictures where people have done a contrasting color running stitch. Is that just an SCA-ism?
It is. If you look, I'm going to show you here. So the finish that I have here is a overcast stitch over top of a laid in piece of braid. This was found, and I'm going to go through this a little bit too. And it was found and laid into the seam also to make that seam a little stronger. I used it to lay it in over my raw edges. And that was a different color. So I did a little slight different color of my thread in a natural thread there. But that is about as fancy as you can get on those seams. Other things are not documented. I mean, we can have fun with it. That's why we're anachronism, right? But it definitely was a little more simple than what you see most people doing.
Know when you're just having fun.
Yes, and I have fun. I absolutely am one for let's do crazy stuff because it's fun. I don't think I'm getting my document camera back anytime soon. All right, so let's move on. I got a lot of green check marks. And we are doing that hem stitch, and it is going to be exactly like you just said. It is the same stitch, except this time it is on the edge of our fabric, and I have a much better edge here. So this is a piece of wool. With wool, you're only going to fold it over one time, and then we're going to stitch right along that edge. If you have a piece of linen, you will want to turn it over twice to protect that raw edge, because linen really is very it frays all the time. So you do not want to have that raw edge open. All right, so I have a piece here, and can you all see okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I am gonna lay my knot right here on the inside of that. And just exactly like we did, we're going to come over first. Don't go down first, come over first. Pick up just a couple of little threads there, and then come up into your seam allowance, into your hem allowance. And then you're going to come over again and pick up a couple of threads and come up into your hem allowance. And then you want to check yourself on the outside and make sure that your stitches are looking nice and even as you come across here. And once again, don't be afraid if you need to put some dots on here or something to help you when you're learning. It will help you immensely in making sure that your stitches are even. If you just give yourself, take a ruler and just put a couple of dots along in here, it will help you learn. Now, I'm going to show you what happens if you go down first and then come up. It looks great on the back side because you got this little tiny stitch, but look what happens on the front. Ooh, yuck. Okay, so don't forget, come across the back first. Boom. Go down, pick up a couple of threads, and come up through your hem allowance. All right, I am going to clear you all. And I want you to try that on a raw edge that you have available to you. Does anybody have any questions about that stitch? I see we had some conversation that Ariane kind of handled. Yep. I'm watching the chat if you guys have any questions about that stitch.
So how many stitches or space should you have between each stitch?
I do a little less than a 1/4 inch. So you can start at a 1/4 inch, and then as you get better, you can take it in a little less. Really, hems, like modern hems, they tell you to like do more than a 1/4 inch. But I find with my hems hitting the ground a lot, I really like to do them a little bit less, around a 1/4 inch or less. It'll hold that real tight. And while you're sewing, these findings for this are in Hedeby, York, Dublin. They did do the double fold on their finer fabrics, so that is just fine for us to do. And both of these images that are on the slide are finer fabrics with the double fold in there. And you can see that, you know, their stitches, obviously they've been in the earth for a while, but look at the back side of that, like they were not perfect. So you are going to be just fine if you are not perfect in what you're doing. All right, don't forget to give me a check mark, and I am probably going to run over just a little bit here because I do want to talk about a couple of other things. If you need to leave, I will not hurt. My feelings will not be hurt. I'm sorry, a lot of this was because of my computer issues. Okay. All right. I do want to talk about the use of herringbone because we see this a lot. And the anachronism is to put it on the outside. The reality of the Viking clothing was that it was used on the inside. And it is more of a join finish or a hem finish. So you can see on this piece here, they called it stretched eyelet, but it is a herringbone stitch. You can see the little cross here where it came back through, and you can see a cross up at the top where it came back through. So the stretched eyelet is the translation of the Ingehag use of the German. So it is definitely just a translation issue there. So you can use this on single fold hems. It is done on the inside, and then the outside will just two rows of stitching. And this was found in Hedeby and in York. All right, so I'm gonna come back down here again. All right, so we've got, I actually work from top to bottom here. So I turn my hem fold to the left, and my sewing is going to be on the right. So you can start off, see, here's my knot, and then I just came up where I needed to start my stitch. And I'm going to pretend that I'm starting this from scratch. So I'm going to do a little stitch here. All right. So now what you want to do is come up close to your edge right here. You're going to come in from the top, and I am not going through the outside of my fabric at all on this stitch. However, you can. If you are using like linen, you'll go through the outside of your stitch to hold that tight. For my wool, this is really thick wool, so I'm just catching the fabric on the top stitch. So I'm coming back towards myself. I'm going through that fabric bottom to top, and it's going to make a little X as I do the same thing on the bottom. Coming back towards myself, I'm going to do a little tiny stitch right there, bottom to top, and see how it makes that little X up here. So you're going to go back towards yourself, bottom to top, and it's going to make a little X on the bottom down here. So for mine, I did a few stitches that went through the fabric here, but for the most part, I'm just getting a little tiny in here, which will be invisible because I'm using the same color thread on the inside and outside. So bottom to top, like so. So that is a decorative stitch on the inside of your fabric, although you will see a lot of that anachronistically on the outside of your fabric. All right, we are, in the interest of time, going to move forward. There is a stitch at Herjolfness that plagues a lot of people. They don't know what to do with it. And that is, they say that things were sewn from the outside. And I just wanted to share with you what that means. And in this case, I have a fold of fabric laid over top of a flat piece of fabric. And I have that folded in there. So I am going to just kind of show you what that means. So it's folded and it's laid on top of this piece of fabric. And this is a little bit like that hem stitch. You are just going to come across here. Whoops, hello. It'd be nice if I had a knot. And you are going to pick up the bottom, just like we did with the hem stitch, and come through the top, just like we did the hem stitch. And that is going to hide inside your seam here. Pick up the bottom, come through the top, just like a hem stitch, just like the overcast that we did. And because your fibers are going to be the same color, they're going to hide inside of this stitch. So it's all done from the outside. I find it's really easy to do. And then you can come into the inside and do your overcast stitch on this edge and just lay that down. And one of the other things that you should probably know is when you do this type of stitch, if you have another piece of fabric that is also going to be seamed over here, like maybe to inset a gore, you're going to make these face each other. And you can see that on the slide. This fold faces this way, and then the next fold will face this way. And that makes this piece fall in a deep pleat on the inside of your garment, and it's going to look beautiful. So it's going to have a nice long pleat coming down there. All right. So that was a little fast there. I did talk a little bit here about clothing decoration. Again, you can pull my slides. Keep it small, keep it useful. Lay down your edges with just a little tiny stitch. There had to be apron that had braid on the dart. That braid looks like this. Finger braiding is a beautiful way to give yourself a little bit of a braid. And this is what it looks like on the left after it's been buried for a while. Stem stitch was used in Mammon, and they did find a little bit of burqa. The couching spun silver and possumet were the big thing that people used. This is possumet, little tiny knots, and you can see how small that is. It's really tiny. The smaller, the closer it is to being period. All right, there is a list of resources to check out, some of which were used in this. I highly suggest Inga Haug and her books. You will get a lot of information from that. All right, guys, I am sorry for going over. Thank you very much for bearing with me on my technical problems, and I do appreciate you playing along. Thank you.